Welcome to your storytelling. Enjoy the stories, and don't forget to subscribe. You ever get that gut feeling, like something's off, but you can't quite explain why? That was me the day I introduced my wife to my boss. His name was Grant, CEO of the company I'd worked at for 5 years, known for his charisma and charm. And my wife? Camille, the most beautiful woman in the room, always. I was proud to show her off, and I thought she'd be proud of me too. It was at the company's New Year party, and I was finally up for a major promotion. I remember catching Camille laughing at something Grant said, her head tilted back just slightly, her hand grazing his arm, and I thought nothing of it. She was just being polite, right? But the way he looked at her, something in his eyes lingered. Still, I pushed the thought aside. I had bigger things to think about. Or so I believed. That night, though, something changed. I didn't know it then, but that party was the beginning of the end. And it all started with that damn smile. At first, it was just little things. Camille would mention she was meeting a friend for lunch, but wouldn't say who. She'd come home late, claiming traffic or a last-minute errand. I didn't want to seem controlling. I mean, trust is important in a marriage, right? So I let it go. But then I started noticing more. She suddenly had designer bags I'd never seen before. Her perfume changed. She started wearing heels again, even just to run errands. I asked her once, jokingly, got a hot date I don't know about? And she just laughed it off, kissed me on the cheek, and walked away. And Grant, he started treating me differently at work. Colder, less eye contact. I wasn't being paranoid. I could feel the shift. Something was happening between them. I just didn't have proof. Not yet. But my gut, it wouldn't stop screaming. I was supposed to get that promotion. Everyone said so. I'd worked weekends, led projects, made clients happy. It was mine. But when the announcement came, it wasn't my name they called. It was Alex, a junior who'd only been there for 2 years. I was stunned. Grant didn't even look at me. When I confronted him privately, he said it was a business decision. Nothing personal. But it felt personal. Camille told me to let it go. She said, maybe it's time to find a job where they truly appreciate you. And the way she said it, calm, almost rehearsed. Like she knew this was going to happen. Like she had already moved past it. I started wondering, was this just about my job, or was I being quietly replaced in every part of my life? Camille changed. She wasn't the same woman I married. She was distant, distracted. She kept her phone on silent, always face down. Her texts were short, her laughs hollow. We stopped having real conversations. I'd come home, and she'd already be gone to yoga or dinner with friends. I stopped asking questions because I already knew I wouldn't like the answers. I felt like a stranger in my own home. And the worst part? She didn't even try to hide it anymore. Once, I caught a glimpse of her phone screen, just a flash, but it was a message from someone named G. She quickly locked it and turned away. I stood there, frozen, stomach in knots. I didn't want to believe it. But deep down, I knew. Everything came crashing down the night I forgot my phone at home. I came back early, expecting Camille to be out with her sister. But the house wasn't empty. I heard her laughter, soft, intimate, in another voice. A man's voice. My blood ran cold. I didn't burst in. I didn't need to. I just stood there, listening. The tone, the giggles, the shared secrets, they said everything. When I finally walked in, the living room was empty, but I could still feel the heat of their presence. And on the coffee table, Grant's jacket. I didn't touch it. I just stared at it like it was a ghost. Everything finally made sense. The late nights. The promotion. The coldness. She wasn't just cheating, she was cheating with my boss. I couldn't hold it in anymore. The next morning, I confronted her. I stood in the kitchen, watching her pour coffee like nothing had happened, like our lives hadn't just shattered overnight. Camille, I know, I said, my voice low. She didn't even flinch. She just looked at me, as if I'd asked her about the weather. Know what? She replied, her tone almost too calm. I felt my hands tremble, but I held my ground. I know about you and Grant. Her eyes flickered for a second, and in that moment, I saw everything. Guilt, shame, and maybe fear, but it was gone in a flash. She set the coffee down and sighed. What do you want me to say, Mark? The words hit me like a punch. That it's over? That it was a mistake? She shook her head, her lips curling into something I couldn't even recognize as regret. I'm not sorry. I'm not. I'm happier now. With him. My world crumbled. I wasn't the man she wanted anymore. I wasn't even the man I used to be. I left that conversation feeling like a ghost. How do you live with someone for years, sharing everything, only to find out you were never enough? But what hit hardest wasn't the affair itself. It was the fact that she never apologized. She didn't feel remorse. She didn't even seem shocked at my pain. All that time, I thought our life was solid, that we were happy, but she'd already checked out. Camille chose him, and that was the beginning of her transformation. It wasn't just about Grant anymore. It was about everything we had, everything I thought we were. I came home that day to a note. I'm staying with him tonight. Don't wait up. I thought I would lose my mind. But I didn't, because I was already losing her, bit by bit. If losing Camille wasn't enough, my job slipped away just as easily. It wasn't just the promotion I didn't get. It was the way Grant had begun treating me. I'd always been a solid worker, reliable, dependable. But suddenly, I was invisible. I was excluded from meetings, passed over for important projects. And then, one day, I was called into Grant's office. "Mark," he said, with that cold smile I'd once respected, "we're going in a different direction." I could barely comprehend what he was saying. Was he firing me? For what? I'd done everything right. But it didn't matter. I wasn't just being fired. I was being erased. It wasn't the job loss that stung the most. It was the realization that this was all part of the plan. Camille had made her choice, and she'd chosen him. And he'd made sure to take everything from me, my career, my self-worth, without a second thought. The days that followed were a blur of anger, disbelief, and endless thoughts. I thought about confronting her again, demanding answers, but what would that even achieve now? She'd already shown me where her loyalties lay. The worst part? She didn't even seem to care that I was spiraling. I was a mess, and she was already planning her next steps, without me in them. I would come home to an empty house, the silence suffocating. I remember walking into the living room one evening and seeing her things gone. Her clothes, her books, even her favorite coffee mug. The woman I'd loved, the woman I'd built my life with, had already left me. And she wasn't coming back. It wasn't just my job I'd lost. It was her. It was everything I thought I had. All that was left was the hollow shell of a man who didn't recognize his own life anymore. I thought I had hit rock bottom, but I hadn't. That came later, when Camille texted me. "I'm moving in with Grant. Please don't try to stop me." The words stung more than I ever imagined possible. She was telling me goodbye in the most brutal, impersonal way. I still loved her, so much it hurt. But what could I do? I was nothing now, just the guy she had outgrown. I felt myself shatter a little more with every word she sent, as if she was taking every piece of my heart and throwing it away. I wanted to fight. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, to have her understand how much she was destroying me. But the truth was, she didn't care. She was already gone, physically, emotionally, mentally, and no amount of pleading could bring her back. I was left alone in the wreckage, wondering how someone could love you one day, and the next, make you feel like you never mattered at all. The days blurred into each other. I wandered through life in a daze, numb to the world around me. I'd walk around the apartment, picking up the remnants of what once was, a pair of shoes she left behind, a book she never finished, and the faint scent of her perfume still lingering in the air. I felt as if I was suffocating in the silence of the life she had left behind. What had I done wrong? Where had I gone wrong? Was I not enough for her? These questions twisted inside my mind, gnawing at me relentlessly. And yet, the hardest part was not just losing Camille. It was losing the man I once was. The ambitious, driven person who was proud of his work, of his life. Now, I was a hollow shell of that man. Nothing had meaning anymore. The emptiness gnawed at my soul, and I couldn't escape it. I wasn't just grieving my wife. I was grieving myself. It had been 2 weeks since Camille left, and my world was still in pieces. I thought I was prepared for this, that I'd already known the worst, but nothing could have prepared me for what happened next. I received a call from Camille one night, and I hesitated before answering. I wasn't sure if I wanted to hear what she had to say. When I picked up, she didn't waste time with pleasantries. "I need to talk to you," she said, her voice soft but firm. "You deserve to know everything." I listened, my heart pounding in my chest as she confessed things I wasn't ready to hear. It wasn't just an affair. She had been seeing Grant long before our marriage started to fall apart. They had been planning this for months, even before I had any inkling of what was going on. And she had made her decision long ago. She chose him, and I was nothing more than an obstacle in her path. Hearing her admit this shattered me in a way I didn't think was possible. I had loved her so completely, so deeply, and she had been plotting her escape from me for so long. I felt the weight of it all crash down on me, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. The more I thought about Camille's confession, the more everything in my life unraveled. She had been playing me, her lies, her distance, her empty reassurances. I couldn't trust anything anymore. My job had gone downhill, and now I was facing the fact that I'd been living in a lie. I kept replaying the moments I thought I knew her, moments where I thought we were happy. How had I missed it? How had I been so blind? I felt like a fool, like I had built my entire life on something that wasn't even real. The worst part? She was with Grant now, building a future with the man who had taken my career, my trust, and my wife. The anger inside me was unbearable. I wanted to scream at the world, to tear everything down, to make someone pay for the injustice that had been done to me. But there was no one to blame but myself for being so naive. I had let it all happen. I couldn't avoid it forever. Eventually, I ran into Grant. It was at a coffee shop, of all places, and my stomach dropped when I saw him. He was sitting at a table, looking like the picture of confidence, a smug smile playing on his lips as he sipped his drink. I almost turned around and left, but I couldn't. I walked straight up to him, my heart pounding in my chest. "What the hell did you do?" I demanded, my voice shaking with barely contained rage. He looked at me, his eyes cold, indifferent. "It's done, Mark," he said, leaning back in his chair. "You lost. I won." The words were like a slap across my face. The man I had once admired now looked like a complete stranger, his smile dripping with arrogance and cruelty. "You think she's happy with you?" I asked, my voice shaking. "You really think you're the answer to all her problems?" Grant didn't answer. He just shrugged. "She made her choice. You lost. Get over it." And with that, he turned away, leaving me standing there in disbelief. I wanted to throw my coffee in his face, but instead, I just stood there, humiliated and broken. I had nothing left, and Grant knew it. Days passed in a blur. I spent most of my time trying to pick up the pieces of my life, though it felt like there was nothing left to salvage. But one thing kept haunting me. What was I supposed to do now? I had no job, no wife, and no sense of who I was anymore. I had lost everything, but there was still one thing I had to decide. How was I going to let this end? I couldn't stay in the shadows of their relationship forever. I had to move on, even if it felt impossible. The decision wasn't easy. I couldn't forgive Camille. I couldn't pretend that everything was going to be okay. But I had to find a way to move forward, even if it was without her, without the life I had imagined. I wasn't going to let her have the final say in my story. I would write my own ending, even if I didn't know how it was going to unfold. I spent days reflecting on everything that had happened, and I came to a harsh realization. I needed to rebuild my life. I couldn't let Camille's betrayal define me, nor could I let Grant's cruelty take away what was left of my dignity. It wasn't easy. The house felt too big now, too empty without her. The memories that once made it a home only reminded me of how far I'd fallen. But I refused to stay in that dark place. Slowly, I started to reclaim pieces of myself. I started exercising again, something I hadn't done in months. I took up reading, something I'd neglected when life had been busy with work and relationships. And I reconnected with old friends, people I hadn't seen in years. It wasn't perfect. Some days, the pain of losing Camille still felt raw, but little by little, I was rediscovering who I was and what I could still become. It wasn't about revenge. It was about regaining my own strength, my own independence. I realized that, no matter how low I'd fallen, I could still rise. A few weeks after I started piecing my life back together, I received a call that would change everything. It was from an old colleague of mine, someone I hadn't spoken to in a long time. "Mark, I've been keeping an eye on you," he said, "and I have an opportunity one think you'd be perfect for." At first, I was hesitant. I hadn't even thought about getting back into work, but his offer intrigued me. It wasn't just any job. It was a chance to do something I'd always dreamed of. It was a position with a company I'd admired for years, one that had been beyond my reach before. My mind raced. Could this be the fresh start I needed? Could this be my chance to rise from the ashes and prove to myself that I wasn't defined by the mess Camille and Grant had left behind? I had to take it. No matter how terrifying the idea of starting over was, I had to take the risk. The first day at the new job was a whirlwind. I walked in with a sense of determination, even though my heart was racing. I knew this was my chance to rebuild, but part of me still felt like I was stepping into a new world, uncertain of how to fit in. But when I met my new team, something shifted. They were kind, enthusiastic, and willing to work with me, despite my past struggles. It felt good to be around people who believed in what I could bring to the table, who didn't know me as the guy whose wife had left him. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. I wasn't just the victim of Camille's betrayal. I was Mark, someone with value, with potential. That day, something inside me clicked. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was learning to live again. It had been over a month since I last saw Camille, and I thought I was finally moving on. But life has a funny way of throwing curveballs. One afternoon, while I was grabbing coffee, I spotted her. Camille was standing across the street, looking as beautiful and composed as ever. But there was something different about her. She wasn't the woman I had once known. She looked lost, almost like she didn't belong in the world she'd built with Grant. I stood frozen for a moment, unsure of what to do. Should I approach her? Should I just keep walking? My heart told me to ignore her, but something inside me told me I had to face this chapter one last time. So, I crossed the street and stood in front of her. For a moment, neither of us spoke. "Mark," she said, her voice soft, "I didn't expect to see you here." There was an awkward silence, and I could see the uncertainty in her eyes. For a split second, I almost felt pity for her. But then the anger surged inside me again. I couldn't help it. "Why did you do it, Camille?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Why did you choose him?" She looked away, unable to meet my eyes. I don't know anymore. I thought I had it all figured out. I could tell she was struggling, but I wasn't sure if it was guilt or regret. "You chose him over everything, Camille. Over me. Over what we had." She didn't respond, but I could see her eyes fill with tears. For the first time, I saw the woman who had been so sure of her decision, now broken and lost. It was strange. I thought I'd feel victorious, but instead, I felt sadness. Sadness for the woman she had become, and for the life we'd never have. The encounter with Camille didn't give me the closure I was hoping for. In fact, it left me feeling more confused than ever. But one thing was clear. I couldn't keep holding on to the past. I couldn't keep blaming her for everything that had gone wrong in my life. What was left for me in that old version of myself? Nothing. I had to let go. Letting go wasn't easy, but it was the only way forward. I had to accept that Camille had made her choice, and I had to respect that. And most importantly, I had to respect myself enough to move on. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally taking control of my own story again. I wasn't going to let anyone, Camille, Grant, or even my own doubts, hold me back. The future was mine to create. The weeks following my encounter with Camille were a blur of self-reflection and hard work. I threw myself into my new role, making connections with colleagues, and proving to myself that I still had what it took. The weight of what happened with Camille began to lift, slowly but surely. The more I focused on my career, the more I realized that I was capable of more than I had ever imagined. It wasn't about revenge or even redemption anymore. It was about building a life that was entirely my own, independent of the past and the people who had hurt me. I started taking risks, pushing myself in ways I hadn't before. I was gaining momentum in every aspect of my life: work, health, and even personal growth. Each day felt like a step forward, and I was starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. One evening, as I sat at home going over some work emails, my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. I hesitated for a moment, not sure who it was, but curiosity got the better of me. When I opened the message, my heart skipped a beat. It was from Camille. The text was short, but to the point. "I've been thinking about us. Can we talk?" My emotions surged: confusion, anger, curiosity, and a hint of sadness. Was this a moment of weakness on her part? Or was she just trying to ease her own guilt? I stared at the message for what felt like an eternity before responding. "What do you want, Camille?" I typed, my fingers trembling slightly. I didn't know what I expected from her, but I knew I had to answer. She had been part of my past, but that didn't mean she had a place in my future anymore. A few days later, I agreed to meet with Camille. I hadn't expected to see her again, but something told me I needed to hear her out, if only for my own peace of mind. We met at a quiet cafe in the city, a place we used to frequent before everything fell apart. The sight of her sitting across from me brought back so many memories, but I quickly pushed them aside. Camille looked different. She was quieter, her smile more restrained. It was clear that she had changed, but whether it was for the better, I couldn't tell. She started the conversation with an apology, but her words felt rehearsed, like she had said them to herself countless times before. "Mark, I messed up. I should have been honest with you from the start." I looked at her, holding back the emotions that were rising in my chest. "Why now?" I asked. "Why come to me now?" She paused, her eyes filled with regret. "I thought I had everything I wanted, but the truth is, I was wrong." The pain in her voice was real, but I didn't know if it was enough to make me forgive her. "I didn't come here to ask for forgiveness, Mark," she continued. "I came because I finally realized I lost something truly important. You." Camille's words hit me harder than I expected. She was admitting her mistakes, acknowledging the hurt she caused. Part of me wanted to reach across the table and forgive her, to let her back into my life. But deep down, I knew that would be a mistake. The person who had been by my side for so long was no longer the woman I remembered. The woman I had loved was gone, replaced by someone who had chosen a different path, one that didn't include me. As much as it pained me to admit it, I couldn't go back to that life. I had to let go, once and for all. "Camille," I said softly, my voice steady despite the emotions churning inside me. "I'm not angry anymore. But I can't go back to the past. I've moved on, and so have you." The finality in my voice surprised even me. It felt like a weight had been lifted, as if I was closing a chapter one never thought I'd finish. Camille nodded, her eyes brimming with tears. "I understand," she whispered. "I'm sorry, Mark." As I walked away from that meeting, I realized that for the first time in a long time, I wasn't looking back. I was free. The decision to let go was difficult, but it opened up new possibilities for me. I dove deeper into my work, taking on new challenges and pushing myself to succeed in ways I hadn't thought possible. With every accomplishment, no matter how small, I could feel myself healing. It was as if I was rediscovering a version of myself that had been buried under layers of hurt and betrayal. I started to enjoy the freedom I had found, freedom from the past, freedom from the weight of Camille's choices. I was no longer living in her shadow, or in the shadow of my own regret. For the first time, I was building a future for myself, and it felt exhilarating. Slowly, the pieces of my life that had once felt so broken were starting to come together in a way I never expected. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. As I continued to focus on my personal and professional growth, something unexpected happened. I started forming new connections, genuine ones, with people who truly valued me. At work, I found myself becoming close with a colleague named Sarah. She was confident, intelligent, and refreshingly honest. We bonded over shared experiences, late-night work sessions, and a mutual appreciation for good coffee. I wasn't looking for anything romantic, at least, not yet, but there was a spark between us. It felt good to be seen, to be appreciated, for who I was now, not who I had been in the past. Sarah didn't know about Camille or Grant, and I didn't feel the need to explain. What I was starting to realize was that I didn't need to carry their baggage around anymore. I was free to build new relationships, to make new memories, and to embrace a future without the ghosts of my former life haunting me. Slowly, I started to open up again, to trust people, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe without the weight of betrayal on my chest. One Saturday, a week after meeting Sarah for coffee, I was walking through the city when I passed by the building where Camille and I used to live. It felt surreal, almost like I was looking at someone else's life. I stood there for a moment, staring up at the windows that once held my happiness. The memories hit me, moments of laughter, quiet evenings together, the plans we had for our future. But none of that felt real anymore. It was as if that life had been a dream, one that was beautiful but ultimately unfulfilled. I stood there for a moment longer, just letting the memories wash over me. Then, I turned around and walked away. It wasn't that I was running from the past. I was simply choosing to walk towards something better. I was moving on, and this time, there was no turning back. As I was settling into my new life, something that I had feared would happen did. I received a call from Grant. It was unexpected, and I had no idea what he wanted. The old part of me, the part that once feared Grant's influence over my life, wanted to avoid the call, but I decided to answer. "Mark," he began, his voice calm but laced with something I couldn't quite place. "We need to talk." My heart raced. Was this some sort of apology? A demand? Or maybe it was just another manipulative game he was playing. What about? I asked, my voice steady, though I was growing increasingly wary. About Camille, he said simply. She's asking about you. I was silent for a moment, trying to process what I was hearing. Why? I asked, my patience wearing thin. She wants to know if there's any chance of fixing things. His words were direct, but they didn't hold the power they once had. Grant, we're done. Camille made her choice, and I made mine. You both have your lives, and so do I. The finality in my voice surprised even me. I wasn't angry, but I was firm. I had no desire to revisit the past, and I wasn't about to let Grant's presence in my life drag me back into that mess. I'm moving on, Grant. I suggest you do the same. And with that, I hung up the phone. It felt good, more than good. It felt empowering. For the first time in my life, I was taking control of my story. A few months later, life felt different. I was in a new place, emotionally, mentally, and even physically. I'd moved into a new apartment, one that reflected the person I had become. Independent, strong, and determined. The space was mine, and it was a symbol of my journey. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. I'd found peace in the small things, morning coffee on the balcony, quiet nights spent reading, and the simple pleasure of living on my own terms. Camille's betrayal no longer defined me. In fact, it barely even crossed my mind anymore. What mattered now was the life I was building. And as I stood on my balcony one evening, watching the sunset, I couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude. I had made it through the hardest part. I had survived. And now, I was thriving. The past was behind me. Camille, Grant, and the hurt they caused no longer had a place in my life. I wasn't bitter, but I had learned to protect myself from the people who once held so much power over me. As I looked ahead, I felt a sense of excitement for the future. There were no more unanswered questions, no more lingering doubts. I was free to build the life I deserved, free to embrace new opportunities, new relationships, and new experiences. I wasn't looking for love or validation from anyone anymore. I had learned to love myself first, and that was enough. With a heart full of hope and a mind set on the future, I knew that anything was possible. The world was open to me, and I was ready to take it on. Thank you for listening to my story until now. If you like the video, please support it by subscribing and liking.